Please welcome tonight's moderator, Liz Shannon Miller.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. It's my first time in heels in a year, so that's something. And I'm so pleased to be here to announce the wonderful creators and cast of For All Mankind. So please welcome Matt Wolper, Ben Nadivi, Chantel Van Santen, Sonia Walger, Chris Marshall, Sarah Jones, and Ren Schmidt. So it's such a pleasure to be here tonight, and congratulations on season 2. Congratulations on moving onwards with season 3. And I want to start off by talking about the fact that getting the lineup of the panelists tonight, I was really excited because this season really felt like the season where the women really took center stage. Yes, that is it. And I wanted to ask about, for Matt and Ben, at what point did that feel like it was going to be the case? And for the cast, when did it really sink in for you?
I think, from the very beginning, we wanted to tell a story that spanned decades. And so when we introduced these women coming into the program in the beginning and struggling to just get their foot in the door, we knew that eventually they would sort of rise to the top. And that was one of the really fun things about season 2, is seeing these women running NASA, making all of the big decisions. And so it was really, it was a pleasure to see all of you do that. It was great.
I think as far as Molly's concerned, it's always been a women's show. So there was no surprise for this actor anyway.
And I remember actually shooting the last episode of season 2, and we were in mission control. And it occurred to us in the moment that you see Irene, the flight director, you see Margot, you see Molly, you see Ellen, and there are 4 women in charge. And it wasn't something I think that we set out to say, we want it to be 4 women in charge. I think there was a feeling of making really interesting, complex characters that just so happened to be women, I think is something that's important to us, that it wasn't so much a statement as a choice, because many times you say, these are female characters, there's kind of a expectation of, you can't do this, you can't do that. I think Ron, Matt, and I really set out to make sure that you don't think of them only as female characters. And I think that's something that the writers really aim to do, and I think something that the actors helped us pull off.
Ben, I love hearing you say that, because when you look around at the women in our story, you see that they really are just the best person for the job. It's not that they're the best man for the job. I mean, Karen is an incredible business owner and is savvy and took something that wasn't worth much and made it into something that's worth a lot. Same goes for Molly. Same goes for all the girls on this panel that are the lead women in this story. And so I think exactly what you're saying, that to look at these female characters and say, this is a woman and her relationship tangential to a man, she's so-and-so's wife, or she's so-and-so's mother. It's typically how we see female stories told. And I love that you guys have shepherded this world where these women are truly the divining rod of who they are, and what we see them made of is based off of the content of their character and the acumen they have for science or for business. That's why they're at the forefront of this world.
Chantel, for you, Karen, of course, started off as a wife and mother and gets to have this very different role in season 2. What were the conversations around that like?
Well, Matt and Ben don't like to have conversations with us. They like to surprise us. There's a lot of trust involved and big leaps of faith. And I remember when season 1, episode 3, when all the Afghans were going out to do like the testing in the desert, I remember reading it and being like, why do I have to play Karen? Like, all the girls get to do all these fun, wonderful things, and Karen's just babysitting the kids at home. And I remember having to kind of trust the process of where they were going to take the character, and knowing that they plant seeds, and there's these beautiful slow burns of moments where we grow to understand the inner workings of characters and what their true desires are. And currently are filming season 3, and I'm still blown away and surprised constantly at where they take our characters. But I think that that's the greatest thing, is that Karen has evolved. You know, she started off and she very truly loved her role as a mother and a wife and being a part of the NASA program. But when we see her 10 years later, that's not what rings true for her. And she's kind of following that voice, even if it's maybe more impulsively in moments. But she's trying to find herself where maybe some people would have done it in her 20s. She's now doing it, and that's okay, that's normal. And we get to see her be human this season, where the first season, lots was happening to her. This season, she's making lots of choices for herself, whether they be bad or good. And it definitely takes a lot of trust. We did have 1 or 2 conversations about some of her choices.
Were those conversations? Those look more like...
Yeah, it was like, so this is what Karen's gonna do. And I just sat there like, what? Are we sure? Are we sure about this choice? But I also think it's a beautiful thing to see all sides of a human character, not just heroic moments. You know, we've seen her go through so much that I understand it. And I know it takes a lot to understand somebody and a lot of empathy, but I will always love Karen's journey, and I'm very grateful for Matt and Ben.
You know, who feels like their character has changed the most from the beginning of season 1 to the end of season 2?
I mean, I feel like I definitely have. I mean, I never would have guessed I would be like, this would be the trajectory. I remember opening up season 2, and I feel like all of us wrote each other and we're like, Karen owns the bar? What? Like, that was just not what I expected.
I think there's been a pretty marked change in Danielle from season 1 to season 2. You know, when we first meet her, she is the only Black person in the room. So that experience is novel. And it is a remarkable moment to be in that space and to hold your own. So she is watching herself, and she's very guarded at times. And when we get to see her relationship with her husband, Clayton, we see a much more playful, more open, more, you know, honest side of herself. But when she's, you know, amongst her NASA colleagues, she's got to wear a certain facade because she knows that she's under a really, really scrutinizing microscope. So as we see Danielle heading into season 2, she starts to realize, I think, that she can't just live for everybody else. She's got to live for herself. And so, you know, at the end of season 1, we see what happens when you give and give and give and give, and you have nothing left to give to yourself. So for me, watching that journey was just so much fun to play. And those final scenes of the finale, which you guys just got a chance to see, and watching Danielle just say, "Negative, Houston. We ain't doing it." I mean, it was just like so delicious as an actor to watch that trajectory from this woman who is, you know, reserved and pulled in to a person who is striking out on her own.
I mean, it could be argued that Danielle saves the world in the finale.
I think so.
Don't let that get to her head right now.
Put some respect on Tracy Stevens.
Save the world like World War III, or save the world like we have a good PR moment.
Those are fighting words. No, Sarah, talk, please. No,
It's a team
dead
effort,
serious, though. This is huge. It's important.
No,
Yeah.
well, I think that it actually that both parts of that story in the finale are very significant, and it's quite significant that it is to women that in season 1 most likely would have been the most unlikely to be in those positions in where they started, based on Tracy's out of practice state when she starts, when she goes into the program. And then, of course, what Chris, you were just saying, as a Black woman and the only Black woman in the program. So I do think it has significant value, but I would definitely say it was a two-hander there.
Put her here, coach.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
I would say it's a four-hander. because Margot's the one keeping Apollo Soyuz even like on the table, and then Margot and Molly are like, how the hell do we get those two outside of the base and back? I don't know. I feel like depending on what prism you look at it through, one of the things that I think is really cool about that season finale is that there's a little bit of a hero in every character's journey, whether it's Ellen finally saying like, no way, or Sarah, Tracy saying to Gordo, like, the two of us are going together, or Danielle saying like, no way, I'm going for it, or Molly.
I came up with the duct tape.
Yeah, see, there we go.
Visionary.
I died. So, I don't know. I mean,
Let's take a poll.
brag or anything. I just
In
gave my
my
life
duct
for
tape.
my
Literally,
country
you
and
died
world,
in my
planet
duct tape.
Earth, but it's fine. For all mankind,
I was in the basement of a bar. I don't know what you guys were doing. I was just chilling in the basement.
But I think that what Ren is talking about is super important, because so often when we see stories of women, we see stories of infighting and cattiness and kind of like ego-based BS. And I love, like what Ben was saying a second ago, that we watch these titans of industry, this highly intelligent go-getter, this mathematical genius, even Aleda. We're watching.
I was just about to say that. I was about to say, wait, we got to give props to Aleda too, because if she hadn't caught Gordo trying to, get into Houston, then we wouldn't have been able to kill ourselves. And
but I think in our I think in our microcosm of our world, it's really important. But I also think in the macrocosm of like the audience who's watching our show and the ways in which our show presents itself to the world, I think it's awesome to show that level of female camaraderie and representation. These are women who are badasses, and they're working together to make this thing happen.
Let's talk a little bit about Tracy's sacrifice, because that is a huge moment for the show. You're saying goodbye to two major cast members. Matt and Ben, can you talk a little bit about what led up to that decision? And, was it very hard?
Oh, it's still hard. I think we knew it was really the right decision in thinking about the story because it was so hard. In a lot of ways, and we kept saying to each other, we cannot do this. We love these two so much, both the characters and the actors, and it was very difficult. And so I think, but the story just led us to that point. And I think both the sacrifice and the sort of seeing these two people who had such a complicated relationship over the course of the two seasons, over these decades, kind of come back together in the end. There was such a nice reconnection in that point that it just felt like the perfect moment to do that.
It was really easy, to be honest. No.
There's the truth.
I really wanted to kill everyone. No, I think every year, the nature of the show, because we jump in time like this, we know ahead of time in the very beginning that we're not going to be able to hold on to all our characters. And I think the problem becomes, as creators, that you fall in love with your characters and you fall in love with the actors who play these characters. And then I saw us as we went through the season in the writer's room even arguing, and we can't do this. We can't. It's one thing to say you're going to do it. It's another thing to actually do it. And we wanted to give them their due. I think one thing that was really beautiful that we saw happen was this love story, and a really complicated love story where these aren't perfect people. One of the things that struck with me a lot in the reaction to season 2 is, and even season 1, people say, I hate Gordo, or how many times you hear, I hate Gordo, I hate Tracy, I love Gordo, I love Tracy. Every episode shifts it. And by the end, the fact that these two came together in such a beautiful way, it really felt like an end. It felt like whatever story we tell beyond this will never live up to that moment. And that it felt like the right ending, and a really badass, heroic ending. And I feel, I remember being on set on that last day, and they're in the duct tape.
Doing the robot, by the way.
Doing the robot. And I remember thinking, I told Matt this, I'm like, this is either going to be the stupidest thing ever done.
I was sure. We were watching, and I was like, this is not going to work. This is going to go down in flames. But I think it turned out well.
It did, and I think it's a testament to you and to Michael. I mean, what what you guys brought to these characters. It's to put two people in duct tape suits and have them run across the surface. You have to love these people. You really have to love them to go with them on that journey. And I feel like that's what was happening there.
This is a small detail, but I'm wildly curious. For the final tableau where we see, Tracy and Gordon together, sadly passed away, was that actually Sarah and Michael in heavy makeup, or was there some sort of prosthetic involved?
Yeah, it was them. We shot it a bunch of different ways. We shot it eyes closed, eyes open.
Well, it was a weird conversation. I remember we were thinking, what position should they be in? And I was like, holding hands feels a little corny, but then if they're lying this way, so I think it was you, Michael, and director, and me kind of deciding which position.
Yeah, we tried a bunch. Tried a lot of positions. Well, we had a ton of suits, ton of death suits, but we had 3 phases. So the first one, thank God, was the one we wore the least amount, which was before, our blood vessels started to explode. And that was the hardest to move in. So they were very tight. And I was actually, little backstory. Right before Michael and I are essentially supposed to shoot all of the climatic scenes that we were supposed to shoot, we went on hiatus because of COVID. So I was quite relieved that I could even fit into that suit when I came back.
You mean duct tape is not forgiving?
It's not. Turns out it's really not. But I was able to squeeze into it. And it was also something Michael and I had to talk about, where we just sort of had to reacclimate and figure out how to get back into it. Because of course, when you're shooting and you've got a rhythm going and you're ramping up, even if you're not shooting in sequence, there is sort of an energy and an understanding, and you've found your place, and then everything just stopped. And so when we came back, we had to ramp right back up, because of course, especially in the environment that we were in, under the guidelines and the rules that we needed to follow and the protocol that we needed to follow, we didn't have hours upon hours to finish the day either. So that was really interesting. But the suits were helpful, because phase 1 was a really tight suit, and we didn't have to wear that for too long. And then phase 2 is when they started, the more they would rip it up and make the boils and all that, the easier it was to run and fall on the surface of the moon and pick each other up and the whole thing. I just thought it was just so genius of the wardrobe department and what they came up with, and how creative it was, and how gruesome it was.
I still haven't watched it on purpose. I have not watched the finale, guys, because I think if I don't watch it, it didn't happen. I tell myself that every day, by the way.
Yeah, see if I'm on set this week. That might...
I'm going to have you be my on set
that
buddy.
that might give you a kick.
I keep waiting. Trust me, I'm just waiting for you to show up.
Well, it is interesting that because of the way things play out in the finale, one thing that we never get to see on the show is what kind of conversation would take place between Karen and Tracy regarding Tracy's son.
Thank goodness. It's the only good thing.
I don't have earrings on right now.
Yeah.
But if I did, I'd be giving them to Chris. No, I'm kidding. You know what's interesting? We have never actually talked about that. We have never talked about that.
Now's the time.
We don't need to. I think it's going to turn into like a Jerry Springer
got the
ordeal. Security's going to come in.
Tracy.
I know, and it's something that I feel like most people comment on, like, how could you do that when it's your best friend? And I'm like, I don't think that people think that far. I don't think that Karen thought of it as like, oh, wait a second, this is my best friend's son. Or, I think that there's this time jump that happens, and it's obviously quite impulsive. I could reason a million different reasons and understandings why, but at the end of the day, we're all human, and mistakes are made and things happen. And sorry, Tracy. Sorry, Tracy.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, I'm dead. I don't know. It's fine. I do think, I mean, if I'm going to answer that question, I don't think it would come out for a very long time. And I think by the time it does, for Tracy, I think it would depend on how well her sons are doing. If her son is really screwed up, there would probably be words, maybe, Tracy's from the South, she grew up with brothers. But I think if her sons were okay and they're, next to Molly, I would say Tracy probably has a more progressive thought about things, of a to each their own kind of perspective. Because if you remember in season 1, she wasn't exactly committed to the Astra wife life to begin with. She was kind of just doing the bare minimum so that her husband could get to the moon. And then, she's already got her youngest breaking the law to send her cigarettes to the moon. I don't know. I think she might be a little open-minded about it in some weird way. They're probably drunk at some point, and she'd go, well, he's married and gave me grandbabies, so it all turned out, and they're not your grandbabies, so it all turned out well, and they're mine, and they're not your kids, so I think we're all right.
The writing
Cheers.
stuff for season 3? What's happening?
As fun as this conversation, I want to make sure I want to ask Sonia about Molly's journey over the season, which is an incredible one. And I wanted to find out, from your perspective, what was it like kind of taking on this idea of a debilitating illness like that?
I think it's interesting. Molly is someone that doesn't countenance failure or defeat really ever, or the idea of being debilitated or diminished in any way. She doesn't deal with authority terribly well, be that the voice of NASA or the science or the doctor or any kind of authority figure is anathema to Molly. So dealing with a debilitating illness was more about dealing with her own ego than it was dealing with a condition. It was more about Molly coming to terms with, how am I going to deal with a roadblock that is actually insurmountable, that is non-negotiable? This eyesight is disappearing. That's not something you can say no to. So it became quite a sort of existential thing to play or think about anyway. And interesting, a really fun physical challenge to take on of diminished ability and going against it anyway, and how much do you disguise it? How much do you lean into it? I enjoyed the physicality of it. It's always fun as an actor to be asked to do something physical, I find.
Was there any sort of research you did into this sort of condition to figure out, like...
Sure, I love research. I'll do research anyway, just for fun. So yeah, I looked up glaucoma. It didn't... I played around with how much Molly was genuinely encumbered by it. There was also an element at the beginning of the show where she comes back from the moon. It was, always interesting to talk to our astronaut, Garrett Reisman, who'd spent over 100 days on the International Space Station, so has real experience of what it is to be in space and come back from space. And he talked about just, you shrink in space. When you come back, you actually gain quarters of an inch or something. I don't know, something accurate. But you've contracted, and therefore to come back, there is a physical accommodation. You're often stiff. There's often pains and aches that you take on because your literally muscles are reaccommodating to gravity. So that was fun. Episode 2, we played golf, or episode 3, I think. We played golf, and I was like, maybe Molly aches. Maybe she not only, sight wasn't an issue then, but maybe there's some aches and pains, and all of that is fun to research and find out about.
Do you remember when we went to the driving range together at the beginning of the season?
I remember that vividly.
I'd like to forget.
I just want to say there is some serious golfers in this cast. You're not looking at any of them?
No.
Man, that was a good day. That was so, so great. One after another, we go to tee up, and all of us are supposed to be able to play golf well. And we've all gone to the range. Chantel and I have diligently practiced for hours. I've got a
Clubs
driver
like in the back of our car
in my
to practice.
car. I've been in my trailer. I've done it. I'm like, I've got this. I've totally got this. We're all like, there's a lot of talk about how we're actually quite confident about what's going to happen. One after another, we go to tee up. Joel hits it. I think it goes backwards.
Back towards the camera. Back towards the camera.
I hit it. I don't think it moves. And then I hit it again, and maybe it like dribbles sort of there. And then you hit it, and it goes diagonally.
somewhere.
It's such a shit show. I'm sorry.
But
it's
the whole time,
such
the whole
a
time, the
mess.
director's like, but after they hit it, you guys don't laugh and just look where it's supposed to go. Just look out into
I'm
the open.
begging if you go back and watch the scene, because you will see whoever is taking the shot is there diligently doing it, adjusting the cap, the grip. Back of shot, there are 3 actors who are staring at the ground, and if you look closely, their shoulders are going like this because none of us can make eye contact with what is happening over there. By the end, the director's going, "Don't worry, we'll green screen it. It's fine. We'll just look like you're hitting it. Just look like you're hitting." How you cut that thing, I will never know. There must have been easier to cut moon sequences than to cut that golf sequence. I'm telling you. Disaster.
Matt and Ben, were you literally getting a call from set like, we're going to need an extra couple thousand for the effects budget
A lot
this
of
episode?
visual effects. That was actually one of our heaviest visual effects sequences in the whole show.
The old golfing
Sorry.
scene.
Yeah, you'll never see a golf scene again in For All Mankind. I'll tell you that.
Not with me in it, that's for sure. Tennis, by the way. I play a mean tennis game.
Question I have for Ren is, there's some heartbreaking moments in the finale, but honestly, for me, probably one of the hardest is the scene with the Russians at the end and knowing that Margot's about to get worked as a potential Russian asset. For you, especially given that this is like it affects one of the first real relationships we've gotten to see Margot develop. What was that experience like?
Fun. It was really fun. I guess when you said that, I was just thinking in terms of like Margot's other personal relationship with Von Braun. I think the thing that's interesting to me about Sergei is he's probably the first person that's come along who has been as interesting to her as Von Braun was, as far as his interest in the same things, his ability to challenge her intellect, his interest in doing really good work. And that they both kind of share a very similar, tricky role in kind of a like, here's this insane problem, and you have to do it with a blindfold in both of your hands tied behind your back. Just in the sense of that it's kind of like you can't give an inch, and you need to figure out a solution that means that neither of you is giving an inch. Like, go. I like the fact that where we ended up is ambiguous. I hope that the audience, I hope you guys are kind of wondering, what does she know? Like, does she know something's going on? Clearly he knows something's going on, but it's interesting. It's fun to see what that is in our 3rd season, but I don't want to say any more than that. But yeah, she's somebody who's excited by work. She's really, really excited by her job. And I really loved that in our 1st season, I think it was the 2nd episode, Gene Kranz is interviewing Margot to become one of the FIDO controllers, and he's asking her if she's interested in a family, and she's like, no. And she knows she's not supposed to say that, but she's unabashedly like, no, I just want to do this. So it's really fun. I don't want to give anything away. I still feel like, to me, it's really interesting as well.
You brought up season 3, and I know that you guys are working on it right now and that you're not going to reveal any major spoilers. But I would love to know what you can potentially tease about the 90s and this show.
Mars has something to do with season 3, I can tell you that. Spoiler.
Yeah, what's interesting about I know this is a dodge, but I'm going to dodge the question because I think the fun of the show is finding out later. And what I would say is, even to us, when we write each season, what's great about television is you have these 10 episodes, and in the writer's room, you're setting out, this is what we think this season's going to be. But even as we're writing the season, so many things change. And I think what Matt and I pride ourselves on is the ability to have that freedom and flexibility. So as we're seeing the performances, as we're watching the early cuts, we are changing the later episodes as it goes. So it's kind of this living creature, which is something you don't see very often in features or in shorter spurts. And I think, like I was saying with the second season, a lot of what happened at the end wasn't necessarily what was planned in the beginning. So yes, it's very intricate. I would say there's sometimes we call it a symphony. You have this large an ensemble. We have to find a way to kind of weave from episode to episode with our cast, and it all comes together in the end. And I think it's something we learned a lot in Fargo, because every season in Fargo, you had to start over and tell that story. And I think here, what's exciting is, and different, is this ability to jump a decade every season. So when you ask a spoiler, I think immediately my head goes, well, I know what's happening in the first episode. And it's definitely going to, I think there are going to be a lot of surprises. I know that in terms of where people are and what they're doing. And I think the freedom we have where we can jump that far ahead in time allows us to have characters change that much in a natural way, which is nice.
And I tell you, as an actor, that is so much fun to play. I mean, even though we know that there's a 10-year gap between season 1 and season 2, as an actor, you still just can't help but think, Karen will be mourning the death of Shane, and Danielle will be so happy in love with Clayton, and your mind just can't help but to assume that where you left off is somewhere in the vein of where you're going to pick back up again. And so, and talking to you guys when we were doing the podcast and saying that this is why part of the construct of making the 10-year gap is so that you're not tethered to any logical sense of she last did this, now she's doing this. So again, Liz, we're just dodging left and right. We're not going to answer a single question. No questions were answered tonight. But I think that as an audience member and as a performer, knowing that whatever you saw at the end of season 2 is not at all what you will see at the beginning of season 3.
No, it's totally exciting. What was in the writing of season 2? What was the thing that ended up becoming the biggest surprise for you in the writer's room?
I mean, I think the Gordo Tracy storyline, to be honest, I mean, where Tracy starts and where Gordo starts, to say that we knew, we had a vague idea of what we thought it was going to be. To tell you, I don't think we thought necessarily they'd both be dead at the end. Seeing how that evolved from episode 1 to episode 10, it's almost like the story was telling us that's what the ending should be.
I would also say for me, when we were seriously considering having Sally Ride pull a gun on someone in space, that was probably a surprising moment for me. I was like, are we really going to do this? Okay, well, let's do it.
We do ask ourselves a lot in the room, like, are we really going to do this? I think that's the most common question we ask ourselves as writers. Like, are we really going to do this? And I think we pride ourselves on finding a way to do it. Yeah.
Are we really going to do this moment, the moment when you know that it's actually probably something you should do?
It's definitely a challenge.
I've been pitching something, though, over and over again, and I just want to know, do you guys in the writer's room say, are we really going to do this? Which is, I think Margot secretly takes tap classes. And I mean, I feel like I've said this over and over again. I just beating a dead horse, but I would love for there just to be like some random tap class, and there's Margot in the back, very poorly, trying to like buffalo. What is it?
Ren has been talking about these tap dance classes since season 1.
Totally. See?
I think in your 80s, that's when you'll start tap dancing.
That's going to look really good. Everyone mark
Ren,
your
do you
calendar.
actually tap?
Poorly. Clog. Clogging? I don't know. I clogged in 5th and 6th grade.
You still got it.
That's right. So, I don't know. Just tomorrow, when you're in the writer's room, just say, Ren yet again said this. Are we really going to do it? What do you guys think?
I think that may have just broken open the end of season 3. I think that
great.
might have been the piece we were looking for that just
Molly, too.
brought it all together.
We'll go together.
Keep me out of it.
So we're going to wrap things up here, but I wanted to thank you guys again so much for your time tonight and for a wonderful season of television. So a round of applause.
Thanks.
And I think I speak for a lot of people here when I say we cannot wait for season 3. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Liz.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all for coming out on a cold night.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Appreciate
everyone.
it.